Folks, also, we'll get to your chats if you want to get in on that, as well as the phone calls. Phone lines are open at 478-344-6623. I wanted to bring this up, too, because we were discussing it last night in our group text. It's amazing sometimes, we're Razorback fans are very critical and skeptical right now of the basketball program, just like everybody else, and the direction it will go. But it is amazing, though, that sometimes the ones that are over the top and always super supportive and super positive about everything really are kind of coming out of the woodwork for trying to justify and make reasons and excuses for why the things aren't going as well as they are. And I think one of the things that was discussed is about, hey, listen, it's the first year for John Calipari. It takes a little while for these things to get going. I mean, what other first-year coaches go into their program and do really well? It's amazing how, so many people are looking at that and saying that that's a legitimate excuse as to why the team's struggling so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that was probably something you could maybe hang your hat on several years ago, but, with the transfer portal and just the way college basketball is now with roster construction, it's not a thing. This is a what have you done for me lately situation. It's an instant gratification. And when you go out and get a Hall of Fame head coach with the type of NIL resources that Cal has, it's fair and reasonable to have high expectations and not crazy. Again, we said this yesterday. None of us were up here saying, oh, it's Final Four or bust, but you expect to have a really good basketball team. You expect them to be further along than they are. You don't expect them to be 0-3 in SEC play with a couple home losses. And I just look around the country because I got to thinking about this. It's like, all right, well, I always think about Kentucky naturally, right? Because John Calipari came from Kentucky. Kentucky, Mark Pope, he's in the exact same situation over there with a bunch of new guys or whatever, and they're killing it. We know that. I mean, they're 13-3. They're 13th in the net rankings, but he's not the only one. And I'm not trying to pile on Cal here. I want Arkansas to trust me. I want Arkansas. I need them to figure it out for the sake of my sanity with the pot at the palace. But think about some of the other first-year coaches right now. Dusty May at Michigan. They're 13-3. They're 11th in the net. Darian DeVries at West Virginia. That program was a mess. He gets over there. They're 12-3. They were in the AP top 25 last week. They're top 30 in the net. Jared Calhoun at Utah State takes over for Danny Sprinkle. They're 16-1. They're 31st in the net. Pat Kelsey at Louisville. We know what Kenny Payne, where that program was with him. They're 12-5. They're 35th in the net. Mark Byington at Vanderbilt. They're 13-3 right now, 42nd in the net. Andy Enfield leaves USC, goes to SMU. They're 12-4. They're 46th in the net. Kevin Young replaces Mark Pope over at BYU. They're 11-5, 48th in the net. All first-year coaches at their new jobs who either have less resources or less of a track record than John Calipari, or both, but they're all currently outperforming Arkansas by record, by net ranking, more quality victories. I don't think we're asking too much here to say that Arkansas should be in a better situation than it is. Doesn't mean they can't turn around, but what we can say right now, it's disappointing, and people shouldn't be browbeaten for feeling that way or being pissed off about it.
No, people should definitely be pissed off. I think when you accept, it's the first year and this shouldn't be a finished product, while that could be true in a sense of like, hey, this shouldn't be a title contender. Like we said, we didn't expect Final Four. That doesn't mean that anything less than Final Four is acceptable. Like we all had our various expectations going into the year. I think we were all pretty aligned in like making the Sweet 16 would be a successful year one for Cal. Everything is subject to change in sports and in life. So obviously we've adjusted our expectations. We can do that. And we can kind of look at some things. Okay, Adu's banged up. Nelly Davis might not be good. So we adjust our expectations, but that doesn't mean that what's happened 0-3 in the SEC, like people should be fine with that. And it's just revisionist history to try and look back and be like, oh, actually year one, like we shouldn't have expected anything out of Cal either way. I mean, Curtis just listed off. That was beautiful there. Listed off all the first-year coaches that are doing better than Cal, who, by the way, had lower expectations than Cal. And they're outperforming expectations, most of those guys at least. And so, yeah, I just can't buy that like anything this team does is acceptable. We've all adjusted and tempered our expectations. But like we said yesterday on the show, you got to get to that NCAA tournament. I think this team missing the NCAA tournament would be an abject disaster. And we said that preseason. There's footage of the internet. That's what I like about this show. Everything we say, we have a digital footprint. You can go back before the season, and we were saying if this team missed the NCAA tournament, I believe it was one of our like buy or sell segments that we did where it was, or what's more likely, where it was like, Arkansas misses the NCAA tournament or they win the national title in football or something like that. And we were like, maybe win the national title in football, because we thought it was that ridiculous. So I think it's very much revisionist history to try and look back and be like, oh, no, yeah, nobody really expected anything out of this team year one. It's just not true. And I don't know why anyone would try and make that argument.
But Curtis, they played 3 top 25 opponents in the SEC. And, I mean, can you expect the team that's in first-year coach of John Calipari to win any of those games against top 25 teams? I mean, how can you expect that?
Well, maybe because he has a $10 million NIL budget that can get him the type of talent and roster that should be able to do that, first of all. But, I mean, it hasn't stopped any of those guys that I mentioned a few minutes ago. Actually, every single one of them, besides BYU, has more quad 1, quad 2 wins, which is wins over quality opponents than Arkansas does right now. And I bet their second best win is better than Lipscomb. So, that's again, I mean, if we want to give the Hall of Fame head coach a free pass for it, I mean, you look at his quote unquote peers who have less of a track record and less resources in the exact same situation, and they're doing better right now. So
I also think playing the first year card is just a misunderstanding of kind of where we're at in the world. And I understand we all are on the same page that NIL has changed the game, that the transfer portal has changed the game. But it's like, I think in college sports, it's easier than ever to kind of get things ramped up in year one. Hell, we've seen guys in football, basketball, and baseball turn programs completely around in a span of 1 or 2 years. And so, I think like anyone who's citing year one is like, oh yeah, I mean, you just simply can't expect a coach to be good in year one. Doesn't really understand the game we're playing and understand all the resources, like you mentioned, the NIL budget for building this roster, bringing talented players from Kentucky over here with you, like an Adu Thero, like a DJ Wagner, like a Big Z, having your entire freshman class that you had signed in Kentucky, they all come over as well. You get 2 of the most coveted transfers in the country. Like, we talk about how everything's subject to change. When Arkansas went out and built that roster, the expectation was set. They're falling well short of that right now. Will they end up being closer to that? I don't know, but I don't know why anyone would be trying to lie and pretend like Arkansas is not underachieving to this point in the season.
Yeah, I wouldn't understand it either. And it's funny how the roster, anytime that gets brought up as far as, with the way things have changed and gone, it goes back to people can be very selective in the arguments that they make. Because say if I think examples have been used, Houston Nutt in football, back in how you took over, the season went great his first year. It's like, okay, well, was that because of, I thought, doesn't it take a while to get your players in? Doesn't it take a while to get your things in? Well, it didn't affect him. My point is that you got to look at the circumstances all differently. Like you can't just always in a cookie cutter fashion say, well, first year coach, no matter what the circumstance is, it's going to take a while. That's not how that works. I know that it was a COVID year and it was different schedule and everything, but Arkansas went from winning 1 SEC game in 3 years in football. Sam Pittman comes in, who's never been a head coach before, and then won 3 in the COVID year. So it was like, what was that? Well, what was that? I thought it took a little while. I thought it took a while to get these guys going and everything. Point is, if depending on the coach, depending on the roster, depending on the situation, everything's different. And you can't always just assume that if things are going badly, or if it takes a little while. But what if Cal was doing great this year, guys? What if he was killing it? What if he was a top 10 team? Like, what would people be saying? Would they be saying, I'm shocked that in his first year, he's this good. I wasn't expecting this. I was expecting to take a year or two. No one's expecting that. So you can't make that argument even when it's only fair to you and saying, oh, well, because things were bad, I expected it to go this way. I mean, come on. What do you think? I think it's a dumb argument, and you just, like everything, make arguments for the sake of what fits your narrative at the end of the day.
I mean, Cal's kind of in a lose-lose here because like they're not meeting expectations, so everybody's piling on him, which, hey, I mean, fair enough. And I'm sure he's not happy about where they're at either. But I mean, like if they were 3-0 in the SEC right now and 14-2 or whatever the heck that would be, people would just be like, yeah, well, it must be nice to have all that NIL. He still wouldn't get credit for it. That man's not going to get credit for anything.
Well, and also, you mentioned the NIL. It's so funny how in football, when Arkansas underachieves, that's the go-to excuse. That's the go-to thing. Is like, well, I mean, what are you going to do? You just don't have the NIL. So now you have one of the most, I think there was that study before the season where it was like many coaches around the country believed Arkansas had the single best NIL situation in college basketball. And so Arkansas is underachieving in a different way And somehow we are still finding excuses to make it inexcusable.
Yeah, but Curtis, I mean, it takes a while for this team to gel. I mean, this is a bunch of new players that have never played together before. I mean, you really can't expect them after 16, 17 games to come together and be a collective unit that goes out and wins games. You just can't expect that.
I hate when we're in January having these conversations, and I'll give them a little bit of leeway from the standpoint of they were bit by the injury bug, and that impacted their ability to gel and find the chemistry and everything like that. But I mean, all these guys, for the most part, with the exception of a game here or there, have been back at it here for a while now. And, I think it comes down to some roster construction issues, with just not having enough depth. I think that's a lesson that Cal's probably learned. We'll see if he addresses it in the offseason. But I don't know. Like I was never really on board with the complete roster overhaul thing. Like if you go look at KenPom, they've got like a minutes continuity thing where it's just like year over year, the guys who were playing minutes for you last season compared to this season. And Arkansas ranks really, really low in that, obviously. But like Kentucky, Louisville, West Virginia, Vanderbilt, all these programs with first-year coaches in similar situations, theirs is actually lower, their percentage of minutes returning, and they're having more success. And that's with us considering that like Trevin Brazile is the only returner on this roster, which he's the only returner for Arkansas. But people just like to throw out completely the fact that John Calipari brought 3 guys from Kentucky with him. That stream, I mean, like those guys played for him. I understand it's at Bud Walton Arena now, but they understand the culture, the system, everything. Like that should have gave him a little bit of a leg up there in terms of continuity. That's why people got all bent out of shape. I guess it was in like August or September. I did one of those mailbags. This was a question that was asked of me. Like if Cal had the roster that he has at Arkansas at Kentucky, would they be viewed higher? And I said yes, because people would have looked at it and been like, oh, he's got 3 returning contributors from that team. And then, oh yeah, he's got these 5 stars coming in. He's got 2 of the top transfers. Like that would have been a surefire top 10 roster coming into the season. And people would have been saying like, oh yeah, he's actually got a little bit of continuity. But just because they switched from blue to red, people were all of a sudden like, it's just a brand new team. They just got Brazile back and he didn't even think Brazile was good. So what did you expect? It's like, I don't know. It's like a shifting goalpost thing that's kind of weird to me.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, like it's not like these last 3 games are like super indefensible, they are 3 top 25 teams. All that's fine and dandy, but 2 of those games were at home. And like we've spoken about it a lot, like even the worst Mike Anderson teams, year 1, year 2, even Pelfrey won at home. And so it's like, if we're saying that like the fan base can't even be upset about losing home games, then I don't know what we're trying to say about Arkansas's program or their athletic department from a big picture standpoint. If you're like, telling fans they shouldn't be upset at an 11-5 start with the most accomplished coach in the country, and you're losing home games to Ole Miss, who you tried to hire their coach in the offseason and couldn't, you're saying fans shouldn't be upset at that. Like, then I don't know what the hell we're doing.
Yeah, I don't understand it either, but it is everyone's going to have their own opinion. They're going to have the people that are overly optimistic thinking everything's going to be fine, or thinking that, oh, what do you mean, what'd you expect or whatever, just to try to justify it. But there's no doubt that I think everybody can agree and should agree, and if you don't agree, you're an idiot. I'll say it. But if you lose tonight to LSU, there's no excuse about ranked teams or gelling or any of that nonsense. Nothing. There's no excuses, and none are going to be accepted, and all of them are going to be called out. 0 excuses. And that's just the way it is. So don't lose tonight, and you won't have to worry about it.
Powered by Arkansas, for Arkansas.